All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are diving headfirst into some really interesting political waters.
Oh, I like that analogy. It's very fitting, given what we're about to discuss.
Yeah, well, we're going to unpack the 2024 election, how Donald Trump ended up winning against Kamala Harris. And honestly, the results are um, kind of a lot more surprising than anyone expected.
Yeah, for sure. This wasn't just like a super close race. It really shook things up.
Definitely. And we've got some great analysis to help us break it all down.
Absolutely. And I'm really excited to dig into it with you.
So let's start with the big picture. Just how unexpected was this outcome?
Well, this was not just like a narrow victory. Trump actually expanded his base, and he even won the popular vote this time.
Yeah, that's a huge difference from 2016. Like he didn't win the popular vote then.
Right, exactly. So that right there, that's a big sign that something really changed this time around.
So then the big question is, how did he pull it off? What were the key factors that led to this kind of dramatic flip?
Well, there are a few things that really stand out in the analysis, and I think, honestly, the first one might surprise some people.
Okay, lay it on me. What's the first surprise?
Trump actually built a pretty diverse coalition. He got way more Latino and Black voters than anyone was really expecting, especially men.
Wow, that's interesting. I mean, we've heard a lot about the shifting demographics of the electorate, but to see it play out like this it's pretty remarkable.
Right. And the numbers they're pretty striking. Like, think about this. Black male support for Trump jumped from 12% in 2020 all the way to 20% in 2024.
20%. Wow. That is a huge increase, especially in such a close election.
Yeah.
So what was it about Trump's message or his approach this time that connected with these voters in a way that maybe it hadn't before?
Well, one of the big things the analysis points to is the economy. Trump really focused on things like jobs and wages and just the general cost of living. That message, it seems like it just resonated with working class voters across a lot of different racial and ethnic groups.
Yeah, I mean, those are bread and butter issues that affect so many people.
Mhm.
And especially with the rising cost of living these days, it makes sense that those would be front and center for a lot of voters.
Exactly. And it wasn't just the economic message. His law and order stance, that also played a big role, especially in key swing states. Like, think about Florida and Arizona, which have a lot of Latino voters.
Right, yeah. Those were key battlegrounds in this election.
And Trump really tapped into some concerns in those communities with that message.
Okay, so that's a piece of the puzzle. But it wasn't just about minority voters this time, was it? I mean, remember all the talk about Trump struggling to connect with, like, younger generation?
Oh, yeah, for sure. But it seems like his campaign learned from some of those past struggles.
So what did they do differently this time around to reach younger voters?
Well, they got really smart with their media strategy. They tapped into some non-traditional media outlets like podcasts.
Oh, yeah, like Joe Rogan, right. I remember seeing something about that.
Exactly like Joe Rogan. And they saw a real uptick in support among younger adults, 18 to 29-year-olds.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes sense if you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, younger people are not necessarily getting their news from the same places that older generations are.
Right. They're not necessarily watching cable news or reading, the traditional newspapers.
Yeah, and so podcasts are a huge way that they consume information and entertainment. So that was a really smart move by the Trump campaign.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They basically went fishing where the fish were. You know what I mean?
I love that. Okay, so that's a big part of the puzzle. What other interesting tactics did the Trump campaign use to pull off this win?
Well, another thing that stands out is, after he won the Republican primary, he didn't, like, soften his stance to appeal to moderate voters.
So he didn't try to become more like a Nikki Haley.
Exactly. He didn't, like, try to move to the center. He doubled down hard on his base, on that core group of supporters.
So basically he said, I'm sticking to my guns, and his base said, we're right there with you.
That's pretty much it. I mean, the numbers are crazy. He got 94% of the Republican vote.
Wow.
But here's the thing. He also, and this is big, he managed to, like, chip away at the Democrat advantage with independent voters. So he held his base and kind of broadened his appeal with certain groups.
That is a winning combination in an election like this. Talk about a strategic power play. Okay, so we've got the overall strategy, but what about some of the nitty-gritty tactics? Anything surprising or unusual there?
Oh, yeah, there are a few things. Like, one that really jumps out is his approach to, the whole get out the vote effort, or I guess I should say his unconventional approach to it.
Okay, so what did he do differently? Weren't people knocking on doors and making phone calls?
Well, not as much as you might think. Most campaigns really rely heavily on volunteers doing all that, knocking on doors, making calls, the classic ground game, as they call it.
Right.
But Trump, he kind of flipped the script. He relied, like, a lot on the enthusiasm of his base, keeping them, fired up through rallies and social media. And instead of running the ground game himself, he basically outsourced it.
Outsourced it.
Yeah, to, like, allied organizations who did a lot of that, like door knocking and phone banking.
Yeah.
It was a risky move, definitely, but it seems to have worked out for him.
It's like he knew his base was so fired up that they'd take care of getting themselves to the polls and he could focus his resources elsewhere.
Exactly. And speaking of, like, risky moves, another thing that stands out is just how effective his negative ads were.
Oh, interesting. What were they focused on?
Specifically, they really targeted Kamala Harris's stance on transgender issues, particularly in the South.
So he was really playing to different audiences with different messages, depending on what he thought would resonate with them.
Yeah, you could say that. He understood that different groups of voters care about different things. And that's smart campaigning.
So kind of like a political chameleon, in a way?
Yeah, kind of. He was adapting his message to fit the audience. And, that actually brings us to another interesting point, his approach to abortion.
Yeah, that's always a huge issue in American politics.
Totally.
Yeah.
And instead of taking, like, a super hardline stance one way or the other, he kind of went for a more balanced approach.
Yeah, I remember this. He basically said he'd let states decide and promised to veto any national ban,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So he kind of staked out this middle ground, which is honestly pretty bold when you think about how divisive that issue is.
So it's not as simple as just saying all evangelicals vote this way or all Latinos vote that way. There are like layers of complexity within each voting bloc.
You got it. And that's something that successful campaigns understand. They know how to target their messages to specific groups of voters based on what they care about most.
So it's like this giant, intricate puzzle, and the Trump campaign managed to figure out how to pinay pieces together in a way that no one saw coming.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it.
And we've still got Kamala Harris's side of the story to get to. So let's switch gears and talk about the challenges she faced in this election.
It's kind of interesting you think about it, the historical parallels here. Remember back in '88 when Dukakis lost to George H.W. Bush?
Yeah.
The Democrats went through a major, like, identity crisis after that.
Yeah.
They had all these debates about which direction to go in and how to reconnect with voters.
Right, right. And are you saying we could be seeing the same thing happen again?
It's definitely possible. I mean, this election, it was a real shocker, and not just for the presidency. Republicans, they picked up more seats in the Senate, too.
Yeah, that's right.
And there's a good chance they're going to increase their control of the House as well. So that kind of power shift, it can have a big impact on, well, everything, really.
Absolutely. So let's bring it back to Trump. He's got 4 more years, a lot of big things on his agenda: tariffs, global conflicts, immigration. Where do you think he's going to focus his energy first?
Well, those are all, I mean, incredibly complex issues. Each one has the potential to really impact, the global landscape. Let's start with tariffs. Trump, as you know, has been very vocal about free trade agreements. He's argued that they put American workers and businesses at a disadvantage.
Right, yeah.
He's already slapped tariffs on goods from China and other countries, and it's likely he'll continue that approach in his second term.
But tariffs are a bit of a double-edged sword, aren't they? I mean, yeah, they can protect domestic industries, but they can also lead to higher prices for consumers here in the U.S.
Boy, for sure. And we could also see retaliation from other countries, which could, further complicate things.
Exactly. It's a delicate balancing act. And speaking of delicate balancing acts, let's talk about global conflicts. Trump's foreign policy has been, well, let's just say unconventional.
Yeah, no argument there. He's definitely taken a more isolationist approach, pulling back from some international commitments and really putting America's interests, front and center.
And that's caused some friction with allies, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. He's butted heads with some of our closest partners, while at the same time he's reached out to some of our adversaries.
It's been a pretty unpredictable ride, to say the least.
No kidding. And so the question is, how's he going to navigate those global challenges in his second term? Is he going to stick to the America First strategy? Will he try to smooth things over with allies? Or will he double down on this, go-it-alone approach?
So many questions, and the answers could have huge consequences, not just for the U.S., but for the whole world.
That's for sure. Global stability, security, it's all hanging in the balance. And then, of course, there's immigration, an issue that's been central to Trump's political identity from the very beginning.
Right. The wall, deportations, a crackdown on illegal immigration. These are all policies that have really fired up his base, but they've also been incredibly divisive.
Absolutely. And now it'll be interesting to see how he approaches those issues in his second term. Will he moderate his stance at all, or is he going to stick to his guns?
Well, and this is where it gets really interesting because remember how we talked about his success with building this multi-ethnic working class coalition? Well, that could actually make things more complicated for him.
How so?
Well, a lot of those new supporters, they might not be on board with some of his more hardline immigration policies.
Ah, I see what you're saying. So now he has to balance the expectations of his base with the concerns of these, like, newer voters.
Exactly. It's a tightrope walk for sure. He's pulled together this really diverse group of people, and keeping everyone happy, well, that's not going to be easy.
It really highlights the challenges of governing in a society that's as polarized as ours is,
Yeah.
where you have such a wide range of viewpoints.
Absolutely. It's like he's playing 4D chess or something, trying to anticipate everyone's moves and keep all these different pieces in play.
But as we all know, politics is a messy business. Unexpected things happen, and those can throw even the best laid plans off track.
Yeah, there are always curveballs, and you have to be ready to adapt. So, where do we go from here? What's the next chapter in this story?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The future is always uncertain, especially in politics. But one thing's for sure, it's going to be fascinating to watch it all unfold.
Absolutely. I mean, just when you think you've seen it all, American politics throws another curveball your way.
It's a wild ride, but it's also a reminder of just how dynamic and unpredictable our democracy is.
And speaking of wild rides, this election was definitely one for the books, but it's also a reminder that we're living in a really pivotal moment, a time when the old rules don't seem to apply anymore.
You're right, and it's a little unsettling, but it's also kind of exciting, don't you think?
I think so too. It's like we're standing on the edge of something new, something we can't quite define yet.
And that's what makes it so fascinating to analyze and discuss. We're trying to make sense of something that's still unfolding, something that's constantly evolving.
It's like we're watching history being made in real time, and we're trying to figure out what it all means.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations, to really dig into the details, to try to understand the different perspectives and motivations at play.
Because ultimately, the future of our democracy depends on us, the citizens. We need to stay informed, stay engaged, and stay involved in the process.
I couldn't agree more. Apathy is the enemy of progress. We need to be active participants in shaping the future we want.
So true. This deep dive has given us so much to think about, and I hope it's done the same for our listeners.
Me too. And one thing that's been really striking to me through all of this is just the scale of Trump's victory.
Yeah, the fact that he won the popular vote, expanded his support among minority voters, it's a game changer.
It really is. It challenges those traditional assumptions about which voters belong to which party. And it makes you wonder, is this a temporary realignment, or are we seeing a fundamental shift in the American electorate?
Such a good question. And I'm also really intrigued by the tactics the Trump campaign used. They really seem to understand the nuances of this election, and they knew how to exploit them.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Their approach to get out the vote, the way they use negative ads, their messaging on abortion, it was all very calculated and very effective.
But the big question now is, can those same tactics be replicated in future elections? Or was this just a unique set of circumstances?
We'll have to wait and see. But one thing's for sure, other campaigns are going to be studying this election very closely, trying to figure out what worked and what didn't.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about the challenges Trump faces now. He's made a lot of promises, and it's going to be tough to deliver on all of them.
Yeah, a divided country, a complex global landscape, a political system that's often resistant to change.
Yeah.
It's a lot to handle.
And he has to do all of this while keeping that diverse coalition of voters happy. It's a tall order for sure.
No kidding. So the big question is, will he be able to pull it off? Will he be able to navigate these complexities and really reshape American politics?
Or will he get bogged down by all these challenges? I guess only time will tell.
It's like we're at this crossroads, and the path we choose, it's going to determine the future of our country.
It's a powerful image and a reminder of just how high the stakes are. This isn't just about politicians and elections. It's about the lives of everyday Americans.
Exactly. It's about jobs, healthcare, education, the things that really matter to people.
And that's why it's so important to have these conversations, to be informed, to engage with different perspectives.
Because ultimately, we're all in this together. We have a shared responsibility to shape the future of our country.
Yeah, it really is. This whole thing, it's exciting, but I don't know, it's kind of a little nerve-wracking at the same time.
I get it. I totally get it. But that's why it's so important for everyone to stay informed and engaged.
For sure. We can't just be bystanders in all of this.
Yeah, we've got to be active participants in shaping the future, you know? We want to make
Right.
sure it's the best future possible.
So as we kind of wrap up our deep dive here, what's the one big thing you really hope our listeners take away from all of this?
Hmm, that's a good question. I think the biggest takeaway is that American politics, it's changing. You know, it's like it's in this state of flux.
Okay, so the old rules don't apply.
Pretty much, yeah. The old certainties, the traditional party lines, it's all kind of breaking down. It feels like we're in this new era of, I don't know, maybe uncertainty is the best word for it.
Yeah, where anything can happen, right?
Exactly. And because of that, we need to be prepared for anything.
Yeah.
And we need to be open to talking to people who have different views.
Be willing to listen and, maybe even change our minds sometimes.
Absolutely. That's how we grow, right? By being open to new ideas and perspectives.
So buckle up, everyone. It's going to be a wild ride.
No kidding. But hey, maybe that's not such a bad thing.
What do you mean?
Well, maybe this whole shakeup, it's just what we needed. Maybe it's a chance to make things better, you know?
Yeah, I like that. Like a fresh start.
Yeah, fresh start.
Yeah.
But we've got to make sure we do it right. We need to be informed, we need to be engaged, and we need to work together.
Okay, so big picture here. What have we learned?
Well, we've seen how Trump won this election, right? And we've talked about the challenges he's facing and the challenges facing the Democratic Party.
And the potential impact on everything, really.
Yeah, the whole enchilada.
Love it. So, to our listeners, thanks for sticking with us through this deep dive.
Yeah, we hope you found it insightful and maybe even a little thought-provoking.
We've covered a lot of ground, and there's still so much more to unpack and analyze.
But for now, we're going to leave you with this thought. American democracy, it's not a spectator sport.
Get in the game, folks.
Exactly. Stay informed, get involved, make your voices heard. The future of our country, it really does depend on all of us.
Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll catch you next time on the deep dive.